I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Diane Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it? Yeah, so the thing that's like really been on my mind in conversation is how impacted people are being by US policies, laws, and legislation that's going on, right? Like folks, and we kind of talked about this before, but like folks on Social Security, their checks getting cut, and what that really like looks like, the resources that folks are comfortable or used to having in the United States, even being impacted by things on the island being more and more expensive because there's all of these tariffs that are coming in. So now what was already three times the amount of of money to actually purchase is now like more four and five times the amount. And folks are talking about it's costing more to, clear customs and pay duty fees and all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that is pretty tremendous. And then also, what's really staying on my mind is what's happening with immigration in the United States and the impact on people's lives, people having to exist in a heightened level of fear response because you have brigades of enforcement. They're not law enforcement, so now I want to call them that. And the way that they're going into communities unclothed, and so people are just, never knowing why going, like they never know who is going to be coming to like knock on their doors and challenge whether or not they are able to exist in the space that they have created for themselves. And so those type of things, the horror stories that we're hearing about people, and I don't know the truth of any of it, but I believe that there is some truth to it, like people being sent to places that they have never ever existed in to just get them off of US land. People being told that they're going to be placed somewhere and, finding bodies in the water chained together of folks that didn't make it to where they were being transferred to. The, the border lines that you brought up previously, being pulled back so that then there's more opportunities to create over surveillance in a larger portion of land. And, we talk about we talked about what we've watched in Israel and what Israel, excuse me, is doing in Palestine, and looking at what the United States is doing, in U.S. territory to folks that are there, and and all of the harm that's coming because of that and because of the policies. And how are we going to get back to, how is the United States going to get back to a democracy that's more familiar than what we're experiencing now with our current administration?
That is the $100 billion question.
That's what's on my mind.
Mm-hmm.
As I sit in paradise and watch from afar and be like, y'all crazy over here. Are you continuing to exist? And when are you gonna either do a no more? And what does a no more on US territory from the folks that are there? What does that
And what does
actually
that
look
even look
like?
like? Right. I tell you, one of the things that comes to mind about what that looks like is what I'm seeing and reading about everyday humans on U.S. territory, USians, in some of the larger cities where ICE has gotten, just running rampant, in
Mm,
Los Angeles, where the National Guard was deployed against U.S. citizens, well, U.S. people, not citizens necessarily, but just anybody on U.S. territory, and how people are like seeing ICE in the streets and they're coming out in droves and driving them away. I keep seeing videos in my algorithm
I
of
love this.
people videotaping ICE in streets of different cities and how the the citizens around them have been coming out into the streets and getting in their faces and pushing them back and making them leave. I saw one video of a group of people who turned an ICE caravans. It was multiple cars, you know, the big black SUVs with the blacked out windows, multiple cars in a line, and they pushed them all back. They got up in their faces and made them turn around and leave. They had shown up to raid a, I don't know if it was a restaurant. I keep seeing so many different videos that I'm losing track of like which particular one it was where they were showing up to raid. And that I love that. I love the fact that this, if there's a silver lining, and I'm, if is a very big word at the beginning of that sentence, if there's a silver lining to any of this, it's that the people who for decades, maybe more than a century, we've been taught that that we don't have this power, that our power is in electing our elected officials, and they go sit on this, you know, hilltop, and they make all of these decisions, and we just have to show up every 2 years, every 4 years to vote them in or vote them out. And even then, we don't believe that we have power in that because, as evidenced by how many people don't show up to vote. But we are showing up in the streets. You know, we are getting out there and getting in the faces of these ICE agents, you know, vigilante folks with masks and no name tags and seemingly no shortage of power and strength and weaponry as armed by the state, and saying, no, you're not going to take our neighbors. You're not going to take the people that we love and that we live next to.
That is one of the things that I do appreciate about the spirit of folks in the United States, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just folks that are just the people, is that there will be, when there is a major disaster,
Mm-hmm.
when there is a super like major violence that occurs that is just like so outside of
Mm-hmm.
what we're used to or what we can even imagine would be okay,
Right.
folks do come out and show up and then do push an agenda for change or letting everybody know that that is completely unacceptable. I think about like the George Floyds. I think about the ICE, the pushback to the ICE raids. So
Mm-hmm.
there is a spirit of folks that will get together and be like, all right, you know, because U.S. citizens believe that we should have our freedom and our liberty. Like
Freedom.
if you're if
Freedom.
you're nationalized in the United States, you know, there gets to a place where it's just like, no, this is what we don't. This is what we don't want anymore. Or we
Right.
need enough people to be in that. This is what we don't want anymore. And it's not just about how you're defined as a citizen, but it's about the demographic of people that you live amongst and around, whether or not they've achieved their citizenships or anything like that, where people are coming together as a power,
Mm-hmm.
people power, to
Mm-hmm.
say, no, this is not what we want. This is not how we want to exist, and this is not what we're going to allow. And that actually is what I understand in my training about being a nationalist U.S. citizen going through the school system about what it is that you do, right?
Mm-hmm.
The Revolutionary War was about, no, we don't want the tariffs and we don't want the oversight from Europe. So we are going to change that. And so when you learn that as a young person, as that's the way, you do hold that in your spirit. You hold that in your spirit that when things are not going the way that you want to exist in, you get to push back in
But
some form of way.
I'm speaking of pushback.
Yeah,
I
man.
started going to a book study. Shout out to Kindred Thoughts Bookstore, which is a Black-owned bookstore in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and
Shout
they
out
started doing
the 60s.
the 1619 Project, one chapter a month. We just had our
Mm-hmm.
first meeting last week, and we talked about the first chapter, which was democracy. And what I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know, you have you
I
read
mean,
this?
I know. Let me just say
Yeah.
that. Not
No,
just
I've
from
read
cover to
drips
cover,
and
though.
drabs,
I
so
have the book and
yeah,
everything. Yeah, man.
yeah. I've read drips and drabs of it, and I'm really excited to be doing this. It's going to be well over a year because we're going to do a chapter a month, and I'm really
Yeah.
excited about the possibility of doing this in community. But the it was interesting because you just brought up the Revolutionary War. And what I learned in reading the first chapter of the 1619 Project by Nikole Hannah-Jones is that it wasn't about tariffs.
Mm.
It was
Tell
about
me. See,
slavery.
look at this. Yeah. Uh-huh. It
It
was
was
about, say it
slavery.
again.
It was because
Wow.
the British rule had they had abolished slavery or made
Abolish
slavery
slavery.
illegal
Mm-hmm.
earlier than we did here in the US, and they were putting pressure on the southern states and even on some of the northern states as well to stop the chattel slavery trade that we were still doing. And that was obviously directly related to an economic issue as well, because we were making all of this money on the backs of the enslaved Africans that we were exploiting. So I wanted to just say, I don't want to derail the conversation, but I wanted to just say that
No.
is a perfect example of the training that we get, thinking that the Revolutionary War was about tariffs and taxes, and
That is it.
it wasn't. It was about slavery. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Unless
interesting.
I would, there's no disputing that. A deeper dive in like what the amount of money that was being generated
Yeah.
out of the slave economic system being tariffed by Europe, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
They like Europe
but that's the thing is it
expecting that
wasn't
more
just
money comes back to,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
man, that it was about, yeah, that it was about the slave system. Yeah, no, the United States love slavery, love slavery. If they can figure out how to get people back in, they have figured out
I
how to
know.
get people
They're
back
working on it
into
right
a
now.
system of slavery.
Yeah,
And it's working very well.
it is.
Um,
So I
but
didn't
yeah,
mean
the
to push back on
expectation
you, but
of
I
in
wanted to add
general,
that because
there's
that was one of my biggest light bulb moments during that
no man,
conversation.
that no, that is exact. What else is some of the things that are happening in that first chapter of the book to like unlearn the learning that we had?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know that I don't want to. I haven't really kind of amassed a list,
Hmm.
but it yeah, the first chapter being about democracy. Oh, and one of the things that Karen, who is the owner, one of the owners of the bookstore, brought up was, which I thought was interesting, was a definition of democracy, because we were talking about whether or not
Yes.
we actually were a democracy. And the definition that she brought in that I had not heard before was that a government ruled, decided on by the people, or those people that I'm paraphrasing, so I can't remember
That's
exactly how it was worded, but it was a rule of government or a form of government ruled by the people or those in power, which I thought
mm-hmm,
it reminded me of the 13th Amendment. Slavery is
hmm
abolished except when,
hmm
the people have been criminalized. And so I thought that was really, it was an interesting definition that I had never heard. And I was like, my first instinct and something that I brought into the space was, who wrote that rule? Who wrote that definition? It sounds like a white man wrote that definition, because it's like, why would you do it? Or why would you say it's by all of the people or the people in power? It's like, how does that, who writes something like that? That sounded mighty white.
Hmm.
So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. Mm, I'm not sure if I would attribute some type of ethnicity to that because if we're talking about the definition of democracy, because we've never experienced democracy in its trueness, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what true democracy looks like
Right.
because democracy actually always, the truth of democracy, it always has been supported by those that are in power in the democracies that we know. It's not the people that don't have power. And
Mm-hmm.
we're just talking about like when it comes to voting, who can get up and go to vote?
Mm-hmm.
It's mostly the people that are in power who actually get to do that. Even if we're just looking at the United States, folks that their jobs support them going out to vote,
Mm-hmm.
folks that like have, the time to go and do it.
IDs have
Do,
the yeah, 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 yeah.
do you see what I'm saying? So like, and if it's system of representation, right, the way that we've set it up in the United States, the representation was going to be like we see with this last election, who shows up and who votes and how they choose to vote. And there's a huge demographic of the population that didn't get to participate in that, whether
Right.
or not it's because they have citizenship or they just made a decision not to participate.
Yeah.
And so the or makes a lot of sense to me because it's actually the truth of the way that we've been existing in democracy as we know and understand it.
Right,
So if
but
there
that's not
was,
the way we want to exist in democracy, right? I mean, that's not, we don't
oh,
want it to be just the people in power. We want it to be all of the people, which I've always been taught
yeah,
is what democracy is supposed to be. And so to me, it just sounded like a butt clause. It sounded like an out, like a loophole to say
mhm,
it's by all of the people or by the people in power, which is like, which means it's not by all the people. So why did you even put that first
no,
part in there? You know, which
right.
to me is what the 13th
Oh,
Amendment
the
is
all the
about.
people. Okay.
Yeah.
I
So it's like,
definitely hear what
why
you're
even
saying.
put it's by all the people if you're going to say, or it's by the people in power? To me, that negates,
Mhm.
that's two different things, and one negates the other.
It's completely
And
well, it's two different democracies. But the United States system is set up on representative democracy. So like we
right,
have to add that kind of like adjective in front of it, right? So
right.
representative democracy. And we have the ability to actually have true democracy where
Hmm.
each individual human being gets to cast their vote for whatever the situation is. What do they call that? I mean, when in the US elections, they have the popular vote, is what they call it, right?
Yes,
Right? The
which is
popular vote is like,
yeah.
yeah, this thing.
But we have
So,
the
and
electoral
we
college, which completely negates the popular vote. So to
the
me,
popular vote.
again,
And
it's a
that's what I'm saying. Like this representative, like it's a very people in power represented democracy that exists in the United States. If folks aren't aware of that, because you might not hear it, as we watch how other countries try to structure their political system as a democracy.
right, but
And we have,
we're fed the illusion that we're able to choose the representatives when
mhm,
but then they put all these roadblocks in the way that stop us from being able to choose the representatives except the ones that they want us to choose. And so
mhm,
it's still just another version of that butt clause, and
absolutely.
and I just thought that was so interesting because I'd never heard that before. And I thought, and that's why I was saying it sounded mighty white, because whiteness loves to do that, right? We'd love to say, oh, but everybody is free. The white
Mhm.
slave owners that were writing our Constitution who said, all men are created equal and they're owning humans. So we that's why I said it was mighty white, because we love to do that as
Yeah.
white folks. So
Yeah, and the harmful thing in that is seeing humans that you don't recognize as
right.
human.
Human.
As human,
Yeah.
like that part. Like, yeah, all men are created equal, but those
Yeah.
humans over there are not what
I
we're
know.
considering to be men or women or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, the fact that
We're
you
just not.
said men, you know, was not an
Exactly. Right.
accident. It's so yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, just to be clear, in our Constitution, all men are created equal. And when that was being written, women identified human beings and people that were not white identified were not included in that definition
Right.
at all. Like that's just the reality of the way people were thinking. They're
Right.
thinking about, to your point, who had power. And at that time, people who, that's the or this representative democracy where it's just the people who have power, which were white men at that time, to
Yeah.
exist as those who are able to make decisions on the behalf of everyone else without the input of those other humans to
Right.
say, this is
Right.
what we want. And there's so much harm in those definitions. Again, going to my Afrofuturistic mind, thinking about direct democracy, right?
Mhm.
And the opportunity for us to be able to do that because we have this technology that can support it. But when there is an opportunity for us in real time to see how people are voting and to see how the votes are coming out, and
Mhm.
then hold folks accountable to
Mhm.
exactly what it is that people are believing is the way that they want to exist in society. And I say the words believing that you want to exist in society because you can vote for something and then it's be rolled out, whatever that is, that, and then you realize that this is not the thing that worked.
Mhm.
We thought that this would work in this way, but this
It worked
doesn't
in
work in this
theory,
way.
but it doesn't work in
Yeah, but
practice.
it
Yeah.
doesn't actually work in practice.
Yeah.
And so it's important then to be able to have a system where you can say, this doesn't work in this way. Let's keep the good things, and then let's move the things that we need to do and adjust and transform into what actually makes it so that we all are living with what we need.
Yeah. You asked me what was another thing that sparked me in this first chapter of the 1619 Project, and I just remembered something that really struck me that I didn't know. I knew that Abraham Lincoln, was not. I have learned since my awakening that Abraham Lincoln didn't really actually want to free. He
Yeah,
didn't
man.
really
No,
count
sir.
for emancipation, right? I was raised to believe that he was this arbiter of abolition, and that he was all the things. So in this chapter, she writes on page 23, she said, Lincoln himself had believed that free Black people amounted to a troublesome presence, incompatible with the democracy intended only for white people. What I didn't realize, on top of, just his lack of abolition thinking, was that he wanted to colonize, and you probably know this, he wanted to colonize the formerly enslaved. So not only did he want to emancipate, he didn't really want to emancipate. He needed to emancipate the enslaved because he needed them to be able to fight for the Union because the Union was losing. But he also wanted to colonize them. So once emancipated, all of these formerly enslaved humans who were now supposedly free humans, he wanted to ship them off to someplace else. He wanted to colonize another. Now, I don't even know if he was talking about sending them all back to their country of origin, which would have been wonderful. Of course, a lot of them by that time had been born in this country.
Our pre-Trump is in Lincoln.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So, but I didn't realize that colonizer part of it, that the American Colonization Society, the ACS, was born in 1816, and it was a group of white enslavers and politicians in DC that created this American Colonization Society. And so they not only wanted to emancipate, but they wanted to ship out. That Lincoln was said on more than one occasion that let's see, there's a quote in here that I thought was interesting. So she writes on page 24, this is in quotes: why should they leave this country? This is perhaps the first question for proper consideration, Lincoln told his visitors. You and we are different races. Your race suffers very greatly, many of them, by living among us, while ours suffer from your presence. In a word, we suffer on each side. This is, to me, it was like you couldn't write a both sides argument as clearly as this bullshit is. I mean, come on, Lincoln. I
I just gotta
called.
like, because I wanna go back to getting rid of people because they would be a troublesome presence. And if I could be in the mind of white folks back then, like what is the troublesome presence that you're experiencing? Not being able to control another human being in the same way
Yes.
that you didn't want to be controlled. I don't want to go
Not
back to
making them
my
work their fingers
psychology
to the
of
bone for
whiteness.
nothing so that you could make all this wealth and not that. I mean, yeah, yeah.
No,
And
I
then
go back to
the qualification that you all are suffering just as much as we are. And so wouldn't you want to go somewhere else? Which is exactly what Netanyahu is saying now, and all the
right.
Israelis are saying now about Palestinians. You're suffering so much. Wouldn't you want to go somewhere else? You don't want to live here. Trump said that. You don't want to live in
Mm-hmm.
Gaza. It's a horrible place. It's completely destroyed. Why would you want to live there? I mean, everything old is new again. Nothing ever changes. That was
Everything
another
old is new
aha
again.
moment I had. Yeah.
And then the other part of that is that those that you are transgressing suffering on
Hmm.
to are also the folks that are keeping you, holding you.
Yeah.
Like they're
Raising
the
your
ones that you are
babies.
completely
Yeah.
and totally dependent on for for your existence.
Everything.
For your existence. So how is that human considered to be a troublesome human?
Mm-hmm.
Because you have created a system, a structure, a social structure where you are completely dependent on
Yeah.
on those group of people to feed you, to teach you how to bathe, to clothe you, to help you have an economy, to like
Raise your
to
children.
raise your children, to like literally everything of that's foundationally that you need for
Mm-hmm.
for the, for you to exist in life is being provided by this demographic of human beings.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious about the psychology of you would be troublesome human beings, and then I'm thinking about troublesome human beings because you are the folks that are sustaining my life and actually giving the freedom and the opportunity and ability to be in your own autonomy. What you're going to do is to exceed everything that we have, that
Yeah.
we exist in. You will exceed it because
You're
that's the reality of actually what happens, right?
yeah.
When Black freed people got some money and got some land, those communities that got completely wiped out
Tulsa,
by,
Greenwood,
yeah,
Spring
all
Village.
of all of those places were flourishing, and those people were
Yes.
really existing in a extremely good and high quality of living, if however you want to
And white people
describe
couldn't
that,
stand it
and
because they were
couldn't
being
take it, and
couldn't take it.
bombed and pillaged and literally destroyed what
Dropped
we're seeing
bombs
happening
from
in Palestine,
airplanes on Tulsa.
in on U.S. land and territory, just because they did not want to see Black or African Americans, but however you want to define,
Yep.
you know what I mean, exceeding and excelling and living without being troublesome and not wanting to be bothered.
Yeah.
Like that's the other part, like not even wanting to be bothered, not even trying to do what they do with your community, not even trying to be mixed up in your community at
Yeah.
all. And so
And you've said this before.
to
We
hear
just need to
this,
be left alone. Just leave
just want to be left. I've said this so many times. People just want to be left alone, but
it alone.
like white folks say that they want to be left alone too, while they're pulling in people to do things for them because
Because we, oh, there's your Jamaican. There's your Jamaican coming. There it is.
here comes the
Oh,
cuss.
she's going
Oh
back to
no.
the language of our ancestors. I love it. I love it. That's what we know. The J is right with the ancestors is when
Yes.
the Jamaican comes out. I love
Because
it.
it's just no, it's but it's yeah. When you start thinking about things in that way, I would really love to just understand, and that understanding like goes
Oh
through
my God.
generations, which is why we see what's happening in the United States again, trying to create and develop this very strong white nation. But at the same time, the white nation comes to exist, and then wait,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it only can exist in systems of slavery because that's what's being reestablished in a very strong way as far as like the economic structure
Yeah.
in the United States. And I've already talked about that before. If you're trying to figure out what I'm talking about, go back and listen to our other episodes.
Yes. Yes.
But it's in there for sure.
This is number what 56. So there's you got lots to catch up on. If
Lots
you
to catch
haven't,
up on.
if this is your first time finding us, you got lots to catch up on. Yeah, yeah. So I'm really looking forward to the coming months. I invited my bonus son Brian to join me. He wasn't able to come with me this first one, but it's a small bookstore, local Black-owned bookstore here in Bridgeport, and it was just such an amazing. She had two guest speakers. One was a poet, and she just wowed us with her poetry before we got into the discussion. And we may find lots and lots of topics out of this in the coming months because it was very fruitful, at least for my brain.
Why do I give a fuck? Why do
Thanks
I
for
give
joining
a
us.
fuck?
Until next time, as you move throughout your day, continue to ask yourself,
Why do I give a
Why Do I Give a Fuck is produced in collaboration with Johanna and Diane. Music by Norwegian musician Water. See you next time.
Why do I